Hello friends, and welcome to today's video. So I know you're probably thinking, Melissa, how did you go and get a perm when we're all in quarantine? Well, let me just tell you guys, this is actually my natural hair. I rarely wear it natural. I just like myself better with straight hair, so I straighten it. But had a crazy morning. So I worked the last 2 days, so I just worked 2 days. I'm off today, and then I work the next 2 days, have 1 day off, and then another 2 on. So I was like, all right, I want to film this video today because I'm off. But I also had to go to the dentist first thing this morning because I had a permanent bottom retainer from when I had braces like 10 years ago. And the other day, the one side of the permanent retainer decided to come off of my tooth. So every time I was eating, it was like coming up, and there was just this metal piece sticking out in my mouth. So I was afraid it was gonna I don't know, something bad was gonna happen. So I finally was able to get into the dentist this morning. I had to wait like 2 hours to get in there for literally 5 seconds of them being in my mouth, like taking the other side off. So they just took the whole retainer out. But anyway, so I got up early this morning, did my workout, took a shower, washed my hair, and then realized shoot, I gotta go and get to the dentist. So I just let my hair just dry naturally, and this is where we are now. So, but I mean, we're in quarantine, so we're doing crazy stuff. I'm just not gonna do it today. I didn't have time. So if I don't blow dry it and then straighten it, trying to straighten from this it's just not gonna happen. Anyway, I digress. What are we talking about? Schedules. So I am making today's video about the perfect nursing schedule. So should we do, 3 days on and then however many days off? Do you want to do, 1 day on, 1 day off, 1 day on, 1 day off, or 2 days on, 2 days off? What is the best way to schedule your nursing shifts? That's what we're going to talk about today. So if you like this video, please make sure to hit the thumbs up and the subscribe button with the little notification bell so you can follow along with more of my content. All right, let's get into it. So I'm going to talk kind of about the pros and cons of scheduling a certain way. So if you do 3 on, what are the pros of doing that? What are the cons of doing it? So on and so forth until we figure out what is actually the best way to schedule your days. So it's important to figure out what schedule works for you because they're long shifts. It's 12-hour shifts if you work in the hospital like me. So that's what we're talking about is when you work in the hospital, because it's, you only work 3 days a week unless you're doing overtime. So what's the best way to do those? Pros of doing 3 days on in a row. So sometimes I like doing 3 days in a row because it lets you have more days off in a row. So in a perfect world, I would literally do 3 days on, 4 days off, 3 days on, 4 days off. But it doesn't work like that because sometimes you have to work some weekends and it just doesn't always work like that. So you can though, if you do your 3 days in a row, it does leave you kind of the opportunity to do more days off in a row, which is really nice if you want to, go on a little trip without actually using any pay days off or requesting any time off. So that is definitely a pro of doing 3 in a row, is being able to have more days off in a row. The next good thing about doing 3 days on in a row is that it gives you a chance to get to know your patients better. If you have the same patient for your 3 shifts in a row. So very rarely will I request have a different assignment because I like being able to go in the next day, just get quick updates for a report and knowing my patient already, because then it makes the day easier. So I know you already got that, if you work 2 in a row, but working 3 in a row just makes the second 2 days a little bit easier. Not always, because obviously you can have difficult patients that are going to be difficult all 3 days, or just, get a different patient assignment if your patient transfers or gets discharged or something. So it doesn't always work out like that, but if you do end up getting the same patient load all 3 shifts in a row, that can make it a little bit easier. Another thing is that if you work your shifts in a row and you do, get the same patient assignment, is you kind of know how your week is going to go. You can kind of see, okay, this is going to be an easy 3 days, it's going to be a hard 3 days. You can kind of gauge how your week is going to go, which can be nice sometimes, instead of, every time you come in it being different and you just not really knowing how your week is going to be. And it could be good for the patients having the same nurse 3 days in a row because it's, continuity of care. You know the patient, it's less likely that things are going to get missed in handoff between, different nurses. So it just is better for the patient sometimes to have the same nurse day after day, you know, 3 days in a row, it can be better for the patient. So of course there are also some cons to working 3 days in a row. I think the biggest is that it's just a lot to work in 3 days. That's, you know, if you're there just the 12 hours, which is not likely because you're usually there a little bit earlier, have to stay late. So it can be longer than this, but you know, it's 36 hours to work in 3 days. And that can just be a lot. So that also carries into like when you do go to have your days off, because at least for me, when I work 3 in a row, that third night, I just want to go home and sleep. I don't want to do anything. So even though that would be like your Friday night, you aren't really able to optimize it sometimes because you're so tired from having just worked the 3 shifts. So that can be kind of a con, is that you are tired, and then the next day too, your first day off, can be kind of a bust because you're so exhausted from having just worked 36 hours in 3 days. So in that instance, just being tired from the sheer amount of work that you just did in 3 days can kind of take that first day off and make it kind of a bust, or you're not really able to enjoy it as much as you would if you weren't so tired. And then also when you're working the 3 days in a row, you can't really do much on those 3 days because you get out late and then you want to go to bed early for the next day. So you kind of have to take one of your days off before going in for those 3 days to prepare anything that you would need for those 3 days. So like I always bring my lunches to work, so you know, I'll have to prep my lunches. I want to know what am I going to have for dinner those nights, or try and coordinate with Morgan, like what are we going to do for dinner on these 3 nights, and do grocery shopping and have everything that I need for those next 3 days. And even into the 4th morning, because you just don't really have time. Obviously you can stop at the store on your way home from work, but that's just prolonging those days. So it takes a little bit of extra prep even on your days off to get ready to do your 3 days in a row, and then you can't really do much other than work on those 3 days. And then the last con that I'm gonna mention about doing the 3 in a row is that even though it was a perk, you know, one of the pros, is that you can have the same patients for 3 shifts in a row. And not to say that all of our patients aren't super great. Some patients are just hard to do for 3 shifts in a row. You all know what I'm talking about. So, and like, I'm just not the kind of nurse that likes to ask for a different patient assignment. I just like to suck it up and just take my assignments. At least I know the patient. And not even if it's just like a hard patient, it can just be like an emotionally draining patient. You know what I mean? If it's like a really sad case that you're having 3 days in a row. Like I had this lady who was on CRRT and she was just declining. All 3 of my shifts, she was getting worse and worse and worse. And I was trying so hard all 3 of those shifts. It was just exhausting emotionally and mentally and physically. So you do have the chance of getting, you know, the same 3 patients that can actually be really hard to do, instead of where you go in for 1 shift and you're like, okay, I'm not gonna have to go back and deal with this tomorrow. This is done and that's it. So those are kind of the pros and cons of doing the 3 days on in a row. So the next schedule that I'm gonna talk about is when you do 1 day on, 1 day off, 1 day on, 1 day off. So I never really did this much because it just doesn't sound like a good schedule to me personally. But when I transferred from my first nursing job over to my new hospital in the CVICU, the nurse who was precepting me was pregnant and she couldn't work more than 1 shift in a row. So I ended up actually working her same schedule of doing the 1 on, 1 off, 1 on, 1 off. And it's not for me. But she loved it. And I do know nurses who love doing this because they know that they're not gonna have to come back into the same patient load again, I guess you could say. Or, you know, they just like having that break because it is a long day working a 12-hour shift. So let's talk about the pros and cons of doing 1 day on, 1 day off. So obviously the first pro is that you're going in for your 1 shift and you're in the mindset like, okay, it's my Friday. So you don't have to come back the next day. And that can be mentally good. I think it can kind of put you in a better mood sometimes because you know, okay, you know, I have the next day off tomorrow. It's just that Friday feeling. So it's like every shift that you work is kind of like that Friday feeling, which can be good. Another benefit of only working 1 shift in a row is that you don't have to do as much planning and prepping for your week, so to say, if you were going to be doing multiple shifts in a row, because you always know that you have the next day that you can get some stuff done. And the third pro is that it kind of gives you opportunity to manipulate your schedule a little bit more if you wanted to, you know, pick up an extra day, or if you wanted to switch with someone and put yourself, you know, 2 in a row. You have more, I guess, open chances to do that, where you won't end up putting yourself, you know, 4 shifts in a row Whereas if you're already working 3 and you pick up a day or somebody asks to switch with you, you're less likely to have to put yourself into like a big clump of days in a row. So it kind of gives you a little bit more opportunity to mess around with your schedule. And then the cons of doing one on, one off is that it can just really be a lot, because you have your day off and you don't want to do too much because you don't want to be tired the next day or hungover if you're drinking. So really, if you're gonna do something really fun and exciting, you almost have to do it like the night that you worked, so that you have the next morning to recover, unless you do something like early in the day. But for me, I like to have like a whole day off where I can do whatever and have the mindset like, okay, I have the next day off. Or I think even the better feeling is knowing like, okay, I have tomorrow off and the next day off. So yeah, that can be a little bit frustrating, I think, would be thinking, okay, you don't really want to do too much on your day off because you do have to go to work the next day. Whereas when you have multiple days off in a row, you can kind of enjoy them a little bit more, at least I do. And then another con for working one on, one off is that, when you do go back in the next day, you're not having that same patient. So you are starting fresh every day, and it can be, difficult to get to really know your patients and build a good rapport when you're doing just such a small amount of time with them, just the one day, and not having the multiple days in a row. Whereas, when you did the 3 in a row, you can just go back and get updates and you already know your patient, but each day when you come in doing one on, one off, it's just relearning a whole new patient every single time, which some people like and some people don't like. So it's really a personal preference thing on this one, but I don't like one on, one off for me personally, but I also don't love 3 on, 3 off, or just 3 on in general. Which leads me to our last section of how to really make your schedule, and that's doing 2 on and then however many off. So sometimes it would be like 2 in a row and then 2 days off, 2 on, 3 off. It just depends. So personally, that is my favorite schedule, is doing the 2 in a row, because your first day you go in, you're like, okay, it's Monday. And then your second day that you go in, it's Friday already. It kind of mixes the benefits of doing like the 3 in a row and the just 1, where you can go in and really get to know your patient and then know you're gonna have them the next day. So you go back and your second day is a lot easier, but then you're not as exhausted as when you just work 3 in a row, but you're also not just going in for the 1 and only having 1 day off. I actually really don't have many cons for doing the 2 on and then the rest off. I personally think that this is the best way to make your schedule, is just doing 2 at a time, especially because you can't always do the 3 in a row and then have 4 days off. You can't have that every week if your hospital makes you work weekends, because if you don't work every weekend, you want to mix up your schedule. So this lets you do the 2 in a row and then have 2 or 3 days off in a row. You aren't super tired because you haven't like overworked yourself trying to do the 36 hours in 3 days. You're just doing the 2 days. You get to know your patients, get to know them a bit better. But if you do have a hard assignment, it's not like you're stuck with them for a 3rd or 4th day. So yeah, I think that really doing 2 on and then however many off is really the best way to go, especially if you're just starting out in nursing. I don't think 3 in a row is advisable because it can just be a lot. So yeah, I think that definitely doing 2 in a row is the best schedule, but some people love doing their 3 in a row. Some people love just doing 1 on, 1 off. It really is going to depend on what you like to do. So just play around with your schedule and see what works best. Hope this gave you guys a little bit of insight into how the different scheduling days kind of work, what you think might work best for you if you're just starting out in nursing, or if you are already a nurse and you just watched this video. Thank you so much for watching and supporting my channel. Thank you guys, and we'll see you next time.